Another Just the News bombshell article. The FBI, I feel like they're just like, you know what? You want to see some emails, man? You want to see some crazy stuff we found? They're like, look what we found from 2017. This is an email that came, or a message that we got with a full-on timeline from some pretty high-level people. I don't know, like the Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates, saying in 2017, shut it down, quoted specifically on the probe against the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation in a very opportunistic time.
That's right. So this is a separate investigation that the FBI was looking into doing into the Clinton Foundation, as well as her time as Secretary of State. The allegations that were surrounding that, kind of in the public sphere, where people were talking about some of the interesting people that were high donors to the Clinton Foundation, receiving meetings or maybe other things, maybe an appointment, things of that nature, while she was Secretary of State. And there was even a book about it, Clinton Cash.
Yeah.
And so this would have been during the Obama administration while she was Secretary of State, what they would have been looking into.
But it was actually during, I guess, the Trump administration.
So it began, the FBI started looking into this actually in 2015.
Gotcha.
So the tail end of the Obama administration is when they started looking at this. They started working towards it. And the detail here is remarkable. This is a timeline that was written by a DOJ attorney assigned to the FBI under James Comey. And there's a lot of redactions of individual names. Mainly, it appears to be U.S. attorneys, people that work in those offices or in the FBI field offices. But main names you see are people like Andrew McCabe, who is the Deputy Director of the FBI, the Deputy Attorney General, Sally Yates. These are names that we knew very well.
The starting lineup.
And
really.
They were, as it appears, and we'll get into how in the next segment, but they were putting up roadblocks at every corner to the field workers that really wanted. These FBI agents had information, they had done preliminary investigations, and they were being told, as Logan said, to shut down this investigation into alleged corruption at the Clinton Foundation and from former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton.
I know this probably isn't that shocking because, again, it feels like we have days upon days if they're revealing this, but at least we're finding out. At least we're finding out that suspicions were true. If you felt like things were not happening the way they should have been happening, you were right, and now you have Kash Patel and the FBI saying, yeah, and here's the proof.
So here's why this is important as well, because a lot of people are like, okay, we knew that there was alleged corruption of the Clinton Foundation and Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton and the lot, but we need to see how our government handled that. And when it appears that our government was putting their thumb on the scale in an election year and even before an election year to their preferred people, their insiders, that needs to come out so that there can be accountability, so it can't happen again, so reform can happen at these agencies. And here's what we're seeing in this. This is a timeline that was documented by a DOJ attorney assigned to the FBI under James Comey. And what we find out is that there were 3 field offices, New York, Washington, and Little Rock, that all were looking into the allegations of corruption at the Clinton Foundation and a cash for access kind of scheme that was alleged there. And New York and Washington had preliminary investigations. Little Rock had a full field investigation. So they start looking into this. They start coordinating with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and especially in Little Rock. And they said, I think there's a good angle on this. We need to make sure we run it up the chain to DOJ. We start to find out that a lot of activity happens where the DOJ and the FBI are all having meetings or having video calls, one of which was held by Deputy Director Andrew McCabe in February of 2016. And so this was their first stuff that started was in August or July of 2015. So before we were really even in the election cycle,
so in the Obama
they're looking
era,
into this.
They're starting to look into this.
That's right.
So maybe this is when the FBI was still kind of doing their job.
So at least the field agents. Yeah. Then it starts going up. Deputy Director McCabe led this meeting. It was a secure video teleconference call with a lot of individuals from the Criminal Enforcement Division, the Washington field office, New York field office. And he said that, we need to make sure there are no overt investigative steps to be taken on the Clinton Foundation investigation without his approval. So already out of Washington, the deputy director is saying, you can't do anything until I give you approval of a step of an investigation. This is now 7 months after they've already started working on this. It continues on. Then it gets up to the Deputy Attorney General in March of that year, about a month later. She orders the Eastern District of Arkansas U.S. Attorney's Office shut it down. They don't want to see this happening.
Some people understand also maybe they don't. The Arkansas office specifically because that's where the foundation was set up.
Exactly. Well, that's where the Clintons are from. They have a lot of ties there. Now, most of the operations were out of New York, which is why New York field office was involved. But Little Rock, New York, and Washington field offices all independently were looking into this.
Not working together.
That's right.
Sense, at least as far as we know.
So then we learned she tells them to shut it down. They didn't really. The FBI agents, because we're still looking at, we're going over stuff. Then they started telling them, listen, you have once again, no overt investigative action can take place until authorized by the deputy director. Then there were people that were pushing back, saying, no, we're frustrated. Like, we've got stuff here. There is an allegation. You're just taking it from that one book. The field office says, no, we have confidential human sources. We have our own investigative stuff. Yes, we did use some open source things when we looked at that, but we've done work on this, still told to shut it down. It keeps going, though, so much so that even though the deputy director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe, said, I have to approve every process.
We all went to Toy Story 4.
We get to November 1st, days before the election. Okay. There's still frustration within the FBI and in the Eastern District of Arkansas. 2016, just a few days before the presidential election.
The big one.
Andrew McCabe sends an email officially recusing himself from the Clinton Foundation investigation. So he oversaw it
during the Comey times and
stonewalled it the entire time, not letting people go forward, say, I have to micromanage every step of this investigation, and a few days before the election, recuses himself from it. So almost to give cover of like, I didn't play any part in this. The timeline speaks differently. After the election, the individuals are still wanting to move forward. They're like, we have things here we need to investigate. This is a public corruption case potentially that should be worked. It is like all other public corruption cases, except for it was more sensitive. And then the DOJ told them, you know what? We want to move on right now. We're going to move on from this and turn the chapter. So the entire time, the Clintons, from 2015, mid-year, through the election, were protected by individuals at the DOJ and the FBI. At the same time, while they were saying, we don't want to get into this, that FBI agents had been working on for such a long time, these very same people, Sally Yates, Andrew McCabe, were at the forefront of breaking all the rules, breaking all the norms, going after President Trump. James Comey sent spies into the White House. He sent people because he could to go interview people of the new administration. But yet something that field offices, the line agents of the FBI wanted to look at to do their job, were told to stand down by Sally Yates. That's incredible. When you start to see this on paper, and no, we weren't just making it up in our heads of how deep this went. It's all right there. There was a DOJ attorney that documented this timeline. And Logan, that's why we have to talk about it. That's why we have to bring this up, because it can never happen again.
I want to take a quick phone call that's related to this, because, of course, a lot of people are saying never happens again. That's great, but what about now? Let's go to Margie, who's calling on line 1 in Massachusetts. Margie, you're on the air.
Thanks for taking my call. Yes, that's exactly my question. We hear so much of this corruption, things that are going on that are just mind-boggling. Yet we sit back and we're saying, well, when is anybody really going to be brought to justice? When is anyone going to be put on trial now that they've found these things? There's so much deniability out there. And then you come up with things like this that you found that they've uncovered, and so when does it start rolling? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I mean, getting to what could happen, I think there's a lot of options on the table. Here's what I think. And look, I felt this way too. When all this started coming out, it started feeling very much like 2016, where you're going to have a lot of words, you're going to have a lot of things that go after Hillary Clinton, then nothing's going to happen. The difference is you have a very different FBI. You have a very different administration right now. they are releasing documents that could have been released for decades at this point now, or almost a decade. Almost a decade, they could have released these documents showing this. So at least you have an administration, you have Kash Patel in that office who is at least willing to take this first step of saying, okay, we're going to show you the evidence. Now, let's see where we can go with it.
Well, and when you think about what a chaotic time it was at the beginning of that first administration of President Trump and how they effectively were able to hamstring his entire administration with the Mueller probe, with an impeachment, they were able to hide the ball over here by forcing these hoaxes on the administration to hamper any sort of these type of things to move forward. And then 2020 happens and Joe Biden is able to fill the Department of Justice with his loyalists that were certainly not going to do that. So you have to consider what happened during the first time frame. It's not like all of a sudden the DOJ was ripe for reform and the FBI was ripe for reform. It was a fraught time. Now that people like Kash Patel and Pam Bondi are in there, that's why, Margie, we see there is a strike force. There are grand jury investigations. They are doing what should have happened a long time ago.
It's absolutely easy to feel down because we've become so accustomed to this being the case. And you're right, Margie, where all the data, all the facts are given to us and nothing happens. But you know what? I'm hopeful that it is a new day and new things can happen.